This is a pretty bizarre situation, as Cyberpunk 2077 just got a documented but then also undocumented and quite massive update, as in like it got another 60GB update. This applying predominantly to PC users and PlayStation users. So on PC, it seems like the update was about 63GB, which is pretty massive if you were on GOG, and then a large but smaller 10GB update if you were on Steam. And that 60GB GOG update is actually bigger than patch 1.5 was, so this is a meaty one. Well, conversely, for PlayStation users, you should actually have a system update to your PlayStation 4 overall. So on PlayStation side, this is simple and it was documented. Cyberpunk 2077 had a pretty critical issue for PlayStation 4 users, or well, another critical issue for PlayStation 4 users, where following the patch 1.5 update, you couldn't actually play the disc version of Cyberpunk on a PS4 or PS4 Pro anymore. The game would simply not launch, giving you this error that the data is corrupted and you had to reinstall. Naturally, reinstalling didn't actually fix the issue. And this update for PlayStation, seemingly a collaboration between PlayStation and CDPR, does address that. It'll make it so if you have a physical or disc copy of this game for PlayStation 4, you can now actually just launch it. Obviously, for many people, this means you can actually play the game now, which is pretty huge. And separately on PlayStation 4, there was an issue where if you had a physical copy of Cyberpunk, you were unable to claim the free upgrade to the PS5 version. So if you had a disc version for PS4, you'd get this error. There's a ton of people having this, but fortunately CDPR also resolved this. So if you were having this issue, it should be resolved now. And you can play the game in all its glory on your PS5. But as I mentioned before, that was the documented side of this update. But that massive download on GOG and that large download on Steam is a bit more unknown. CDPR hasn't actually publicly acknowledged these two updates at all. But for all of those gigabytes, we have found one change made to the game, a fairly important one and an interesting one overall. As what it seems like this update added was the addition of ray-traced local shadows in the settings menu. With a 1.5 update on PC, many people, including myself, were noticing lower FPS in Cyberpunk 2077 in certain areas. So if you took the 1.3 version of the game, compared it to the 1.5 one, all of a sudden my FPS was slightly lower, which felt bizarre. And it seems like the cause of this was a pretty interesting one, in that the game wasn't actually having a back-end bug or memory leak or anything like that, but things technically looked better. Ray tracing for Cyberpunk on PC got a stealth update. Originally, for PC players, ray trace shadows were just for sunlight, but with 1.5 it extended this to artificial light sources also. So shadows created from artificial light sources would now be accounted for by ray tracing. You see this nice comparison of what it looks like on versus off. And this was also one of the major additions and upgrades made to the next-gen version on consoles. These ray-traced artificial light shadows are what came to PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. The odd part being, it seems like CDPR didn't realize this wasn't actually on PC, because they released this chart, and it actually does say that ray-traced local shadows were already available on PC, even though that wasn't the case. It's a totally new addition. And if you even look at the settings on the original 1.5 version, the ray-traced shadow setting literally says that it only applies to sunlight. And many people are deducing that this is what was causing that slightly lower FPS, in particular with some interior locations or at nighttime. Now with this new update, there is now a dedicated settings option to this. Now you have the choice of controlling the regular ray trace shadows or the ray traced local shadows, which are for artificial light. It's very simple, but now if you do want to hopefully get some of those FPS back, you can turn this off manually without turning off the other ray tracing. Now, as far as if this is it and why this update was 60GB for this one setting change, I'm not really sure. It seems like you basically just re-downloaded the entire game with this update. And technically speaking, there could be more changes, but again, after several hours, this is all I could find. This is all I could find people talking about online. So if you do find something, by all means, comment down below. But thus far, it seems like, no, it's just one setting option. And then even further, why this was way larger on GOG compared to Steam is also a mystery. Historically, Steam has actually had larger updates than GOG. GOG, of course, being CDPR's own game launcher / storefront. It's a very interesting situation overall, but it does show CDPR being pretty proactive, these being two of the bigger issues to come out following the release of patch 1.5. And of course, it's not only fixing a critical issue, but giving you more options as a player. There are two other notable things on their known issues post that could come in a future update, that being allowing trophy transfer on PlayStation 5. If you got all the trophies on PlayStation 4 already and you upgrade to the PS5 version, version, unfortunately, those trophies right now will not carry over, and even further, actually raising the FPS on the Xbox Series X. Currently, it's only limited to 30 FPS. But CDPR describes how these are things they're trying to do and are not definitely coming in the future. Hopefully you guys found this one informative. As far as my content and coverage of this update, I'm working on some other videos. Unfortunately, there's been quite a few hiccups with me in patch 1.5. When the update actually came out, I was not even in my home country. I was on my one short holiday, the first one I've taken in a very long time, and that just happens to be the 4-day window where patch 1.5 drops. And even further, I come home to immediately get food poisoning. So I have some pretty fun videos, a deep dive on the patch overall, kind of a review of it, but even further, some of those hidden or stealth changes that were added. I'm hoping to have that video up tomorrow. If you want to get subscribed, that stuff's definitely going to be interesting. With that said, as always, again, I thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you all next time. Later.